In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
All right, welcome to the Daily Memphian's Tigers podcast. I'm Parth Upadhyaya, the Tigers basketball beat writer here at the DM, and I'm joined by John Martin, our college sports columnist, and we've got a variety of things to talk about. Again, obviously the Maui Invitational happened where the Tigers won 2 games, dropped 1, got all the way to the title game against Auburn, and then returned home to play Louisiana Tech on Wednesday night. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon. John, how we feeling? I know you've gone through a wave of emotions, right? Like beginning of the preseason, you weren't so high on this team as others were. Your optimism meter seemed to rise. And then the Tigers obviously played very well in Hawaii, but looked a little flat against Louisiana Tech on Wednesday. How you feeling? What are we thinking about this team so far?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. I mean, I've definitely gone through some phases, each one escalating, right? Each phase a little more escalatory than the previous. You know, I was definitely I was lower on this Memphis basketball team coming into the season than any other before under Penny Hardaway. I mean, we talked about that, right? And I'll give you credit. Like you always kind of like you always stop me. You were like, really, wow, like. Wow, you're really low. You know, you always sounded so flabbergasted, when I talked about how low I was. And we know you, and it's funny, we joked about it with you. We kind of made you a joke with your preseason forecast of the Sweet 16. And
we talked about that. We talked about that on the radio and in other formats about, that was me kind of trying to be less pessimistic because there were people who said I should be more cheerful.
I thought this guy, he's flying way too close to the sun. He's crazy.
Right.
And now I agree with you. Now I find myself believing it's almost gotten to the point, and we got to see how the non-conference shakes out. They got 5 more very, very important games. But it's almost to the point now, Parth, where part of me would be disappointed. Not in the sense of, oh, what a bad job by Penny. Not that kind of disappointment, but disappointed that if they don't get to a Sweet 16, if they're not a second weekend team.
Really? Wow.
Just because, because we've seen, UConn is still a good team. They beat Baylor last night without Alex Caravan. That's still going to be a good win. Michigan State. We know Michigan State's going to be a tournament team no matter what. They always are. So, yeah, you didn't really hold up against Auburn. You weren't really supposed to hold up against Auburn. That was never the goal for the season. Was to
Auburn's on a different team.
By the way, play a top 4 team in America on a neutral site and be step for step with them. That wasn't so. But I definitely feel like they've shown they have a chance to be one of the best 16. Right? I mean, they're ranked 16. Now they're not quite there at KenPom. KenPom is stubborn, man. It takes a lot to get into the top 16 at KenPom. Memphis's best finish was 20. I'd be surprised if they match that this year, just because how bad the league is. I mean, maybe if they just run roughshod through it. But no, been through all the stages with this Memphis basketball team, and I would just say my sort of neutral walk-around state with them is they're a very, very good team. They're going to have nights where they look elite, I think. And I think that's who they are.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have nights where they look elite because of the guard play, right? Like that backcourt of PJ Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter might be top 10 in the country. Is that fair? Am I going too far there? What do you think?
I think they're absolutely in the conversation. Absolutely.
And then you throw, if you want to even expand it further, you throw Colby Rodgers in there, and you've got one of the best guard trios in the nation, top 5 probably. You're looking at even a different stratosphere, right? Once you add Colby Rodgers into that mix. But I think the problem, and we saw it even in the wins in Maui, is the lack of presence inside, right? They've got Musa Cisse, who's 6'11", a monster of a shot blocker, one of the best defensive players in the country, but that's one person. UConn with Terrace Reed, kind of had its way in the paint with Memphis, as did Auburn. Auburn scored 44 points in the paint. A bunch of those came on second chances. And I think that's really what derailed Memphis more than anything in that game. But that wasn't the issue on Wednesday night against Louisiana Tech. The issue there was the perimeter defense. The Bulldogs shot like 54% from three, hit 13 of them. It was just nuts. Penny attributed that to what he called the hangover from Hawaii, is how he put it. And that's a thing. Hear analysts talk about it all the time. Teams are in this paradise, beautiful land. The weather's nice, and you get back home, it's Thanksgiving. It's like 38 degrees outside in Memphis right now. It's an adjustment, and you're going from playing the likes of UConn, Michigan State, and Auburn to Louisiana Tech, who is respectable, but let's face it, may be a tournament team, may not. Is on that borderline top 100 Ken Pom type range. It's hard to get up for those games, but for Memphis, majority of the games that are left are those type of games, are the Louisiana Techs. They've got 5 non-conference games left, and they got 18 games in AAC play. Out of that, what is that, 23 games? Out of those 23, you're looking at what, 3, maybe 4 quote unquote marquee opponents, and that'd be what, Clemson, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. Virginia sucks, but Virginia's a big name. It's on the road, so you want to count them, sure, but that's 4. You still got the other 18, right? Or the other whatever number that is.
I mean, it's your entire league. It's your entire league.
Exactly.
I mean, and we had Jermaine Johnson on the radio show earlier this week on Thursday, and we asked him about that specifically. Like, yo, how do you navigate a conference schedule where you literally have no quad one games? Like, you could play all of the teams, and not a single opportunity is going to be beneficial to your resume.
Only
don't have any
twos.
Right, I was going to say barely any quad twos.
Exactly.
And the analogy he made was, we're a mailman. That's who we are.
Yo, he got to go to work. Bro. He's hilarious.
He's got sayings for days, man. But he's like, we're going to go to work. Whether there's a pit bull on the porch, whether it's rain, sleet, or snow, we got to go to work every single day. And so I hope that they do have that mentality. The only problem becomes, and it's not the only metric, but the problem becomes your net, right? Because unless you're beating these teams by 15, 20, 25, I mean, Memphis won by 10 last night, double digits, and they dropped a spot in the net. That's tough.
They deserve to drop a spot. I know people are going to get mad or be on my ass about that or whatever, but come on, man. We all watched the same basketball game. I tweeted something out with 2 minutes left. No matter how this ends, this is a bad performance, a very ugly performance. And people were all over me, as you might expect. But that game, it just wasn't pretty. Memphis did not play well. Yeah, they won by 10, but
it was a one possession game several times in the last.
Yeah, with less than 2 minutes left, that was not a good performance.
Yeah, and I think people have to catch up to the reality of, gone are the days of just surviving in these kinds of games and just getting credit for surviving. For Memphis to really maximize its seed, it has to bludgeon these teams. It's got to bludgeon them. It's got to win by 15 and 20, because that's the stuff that net rewards. It rewards people. So they're casual. They don't really understand, but it's why most of these power league teams, not all of them, but most of them, outside of their challenges, outside of the ACC, SEC challenge, the Big 12, Big East challenge, they scheduled cupcakes. They scheduled jabronis. They just want to win by 30. Look at UConn's schedule before Maui. They won by 40, 50. They just want to run the net up so that they can get that reward in seeding come March. And while a 10-point win is certainly comfortable, it's not a kind of win that's going to benefit you, come March.
The good news is, though, afterward, Penny, unprompted, in his opening statement, mentioned the Maui hangover, mentioned that he wasn't satisfied with what his team had just done for 40 minutes on the court. It wasn't like somebody asked that, somebody pried for that information. He said that willingly. And I think that's a really good sign that he's acknowledging that now, versus in January and February, like we saw last year. Last year, if you remember, they were winning these sorts of games also by the skin of their teeth, right? Against Austin P, against Vanderbilt, when conference play started, against Tulsa and other teams that were just inferior. And at times it seemed like the tone from Penny and from some of those key star players was, hey, like, no big deal, kind of brushing it off, pushing back on the fact that those were bad performances. And you're just seeing a different sense of accountability, right, if you will, from Penny Hardaway and from the team, even in a 10-point win. And I thought that was very encouraging. And look, man, maybe it is a Maui hangover. The good news is, they got another one of these type of teams coming in to Memphis on Sunday when Arkansas State, who is, last I checked, 116, I believe, in KenPom, 115-ish in the net, whatever it may be. Similar
They pushed Alabama. They pushed Alabama to single digits.
They did.
So, I think that, again, and that's the perfect Sunday afternoon, kind of sleepy, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, these are tests sort of within themselves, right? Like for Memphis, not in like, it's not a test like at Clemson or like Ole Miss, but it's a test of like, will this team, because they're going to have 2 months of it, will this team, and how good will this team be able to kind of create its own energy? Like, because you're going into these road games against these rat teams, you're not going to have that home crowd. You're not going to have any crowd at all for the most part, right? At Wichita, okay, that'll be a live environment. Outside of that, man, you're going to be responsible for your own energy. And these games, I feel like, prepare them for that. The last one with Louisiana Tech and the one coming up against Arkansas State.
Yeah, and I think, obviously after the Arkansas State game, you don't have very many of those, or actually none of those at all until you get to January when you start AAC play in Boca Raton against FAU. So we're going to learn a lot on Sunday, against an Arkansas State team that is going to be the best perimeter defense that Memphis has faced. Louisiana Tech actually had the best perimeter defense Memphis had faced to that point. The Bulldogs were holding opponents to less than 30% from three. Memphis struggled early from three, obviously found its stroke in the second half and ended up shooting, I think, 35 and some change percent from deep. We'll see if they can pick that right back up from the second half into Sunday's game. And I think that's going to be obviously something that folks are looking at carefully, as well as, the interior, which is something we discussed earlier in this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, some of those games are, they do the jobs themselves. I don't think you need a great big motivational speech, on the road at Little John Coliseum.
No,
I don't think they need that. I don't think they needed a motivational speech against an Ole Miss team that beat them last year. And I don't think they need a motivational speech against a Mississippi State team that just beat your beloved conference like a scalded dog.
Man, the ACC is going out sad. Are they? What is it? Is it 14-2? What's the last I checked? It was 14-2 in favor of the SEC.
You know exactly what it is. Don't act like you don't know what it is.
Jeez, man, it makes me sad.
It's like Mike Tyson. It's a once great league that has completely been passed by.
Bro, the ACC is why I fell in love with sports. The ACC basketball, right? Like watching that 08-09 Tar Heels team with Tyler Hansborough and Wayne Ellington and Danny Green and Ty Lawson, just run through teams. And, you had them and Duke, and it was just loaded. And now you've got 3 teams above the pack in that league, and everyone else is, kind of, if you want to give them that. It's tough to see. It's tough.
Yeah, but, I'm sure you guys will bounce back, man. Duke's going to make a run. You guys will be fine.
Let's hope. Let's hope. All right, I guess that's all the time we have today. I'm going to pass it off to my guy, Frank Bonner, who's going to talk about some Tigers football. Obviously, they're headed to Frisco to play a bowl game against West Virginia, and I think Frank will fill you in and prep you on all that and more. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch y'all later.
Appreciate it, Parth. John, now that you got your basketball talk, now it's time to go into football and just looking at that Tulane win, what it meant for Memphis. Obviously, it would have been better if Memphis would have beat Tulane to play their way into the AAC championship. But when you're looking at the magnitude of the win, just what are your main takeaways from what that does for the program and what that does for Ryan Silverfield and his tenure?
Yeah, I mean, I think more than anything else, I think it's frustrating in some ways, just because like you saw what Memphis is capable of being. They definitely decided going into that game that they wanted to ruin Tulane's season. They wanted to ruin their Thanksgiving, and it was never in doubt. Honestly, they led wire to wire in that one. They were just so obviously the better team that night. So I do give Ryan Littlefield credit in the way that he was able to keep that team together, even though their season was, technically over in terms of what they wanted to be, what they wanted to do. So it's encouraging in some ways that yes, you show you were able to win a game like that. It is frustrating on the same, wave that, damn, like you did that to Tulane, but you couldn't beat Navy. You did that to Tulane, but you couldn't beat UTSA. So it's a little it's a two-sided coin there, Frank, as you know. But I think generally, it's a really nice way for Seth Hennigan to go out. I thought he was absolutely, I'll be honest, I thought that was really and truly probably the best game of his career. I just thought every throw he made, how composed he was in the pocket. I just thought that was a really nice way for him to go out. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly good parts to it, and then there's parts that leave you definitely feeling like Memphis left money on the table this year.
Yeah, I will say it was clear to me that Memphis wanted to go into that game thinking, okay, we're not in the championship, but this is our moment to prove that we still feel like we're the best team in the league. And although it's not going to look like that in the rankings, they can hang their hat on the fact that honestly, they probably just beat the AAC champion. If assuming I would assume that Tulane is going to beat Army. And so they can hang their hat on that. But yeah, I mean the Navy game, I won't say the Navy game is frustrating. Navy was hot at that time. That is what it is. But it's really the UTSA game. Like UTSA, honestly, in a lot of ways, is what people thought Navy was going to be, right? Because UTSA was the one that was ranked high, Navy was the one that was ranked low, and they end up being the bottom feeder of the league. So you have to win that game, and then you're in. But I know you were talking in previous podcasts about Ryan not having a marquee conference win under his belt. And now he has that.
Yeah.
Does it take the win out of the sails? I mean, I know you just talked about it, but as it pertains to his tenure, does it take the win out of the sails and the fact that it wasn't a playing game for the championship, or can you still give him that marquee conference win?
No, I'm not. You can't take it away from him. I mean, that Tulane team had everything to play for. Even if you didn't, they were a 13 and a half, 14-point favorite. We talked about that at the time, that was a ridiculous number, that Memphis should never have been a 14-point underdog to anybody that they played this season. But that was a hugely motivated Tulane team. Like there's a universe where Tulane wins the game against Memphis. They win the AAC championship game. UNLV beats Boise State on Friday, and Tulane is going to the playoff.
Yeah, that's what would have happened
and Memphis ruined that. So yeah, I mean, it's not like this was some we don't care about this game, like it means much more to no. I mean, it was way more meaningful to Tulane than it was for Memphis, if anything. And Memphis came in there and just dirt dogged them from the beginning of the damn game. So yeah, no, that was a huge one for Ryan Silverfield. Again, to show that he could still get his team motivated and stay together, even as their dreams had basically died, to finish 10-2 in the regular season, that's a new frontier. That's new for him. Not 10 with a bowl. He's got a chance to get to 11 with the bowl. He's probably going to get to 11 with the bowl. So yeah, I mean, look, we had this conversation about Ryan, man. I was never, ever of the opinion that he should be fired, or I just never believed that to be a realistic path. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think it's going to be great the next 2 years. I think there are a lot of question marks, but you just can't fire a coach at Memphis with the results that Ryan Silverfield has gotten the last 2 years. Like it or not, even if it hasn't resulted in the apex, these results are still too good to be talking about changes at Memphis.
And in looking at what Greg was able to do, I mean, he had what, 8 catches, 84 yards and a touchdown, and he had 41 rushing yards and another rushing touchdown. If he doesn't get injured against Florida State and they're able to have him for the rest of the season, or if Sutton Smith doesn't get injured in the opener, I think what that Tulane game shows you is that this offense would have been a lot more dynamic than what we had seen this year. Not taking anything away from Mario Anderson. Mario Anderson was great this year, right? But Sutton and Greg gives you more versatility in the passing game than I think a Mario Anderson does. And so if you had a Sutton Smith or Greg, maybe you don't even lose the UTSA. And this is, I mean, it doesn't matter now, right? You lost the game, you didn't have him, whatever. But I do think that they showed a glimpse of what they were expecting the offense to be if they had had one of those two running backs for the entire season.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree. I mean, I had that same thought, like, man, if the Rosiers had been an option, because you already mentioned Sutton Smith, but if you had DeRosier, I don't know what game that would have changed the outcome of, but it clearly unlocked a different offense, with his playmaking ability in space. Again, Silverfield's got he doesn't need that. I mean, he's got 10 wins, and he doesn't have to say, well, if I just had Greg DeRosier's, I'd have been.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily need that. Because I don't know, like if anything, defense is what cost him against Navy. Defense is what cost him against UTSA. But yes, I mean, having DeRosier's, like, I think where he would have helped Frank was like all those weeks we were talking about, like, man, Memphis just doesn't look like they are really pressing. They don't really look like they're speeding up on offense. Like, it's kind of boring. I think he would have helped with that piece of it. He would have helped with that discussion. Like, Memphis's offense might not have stalled nearly as much as it did there in the middle of the season if DeRosier's on the field.
Well, that's fair, yeah, because the Navy and UTSA games, it's not like the offense didn't play well in those losses. So yeah, maybe it may not have changed the record or whatever, but the conversations around the offense would have been a lot different.
No question. And look, that was part of the whole thing. I mean, it was an underwhelming record, and it was an underwhelming offense there in the middle of the schedule. So it would have at least gotten, it would have addressed that part of it.
But it's crazy that we're saying this, and then the offense still finished from a statistics standpoint in the upper tier of the country. Yeah. So it's just, I think that just tells you the expectation that everybody had looking at what the offense was last year, to be having those conversations about an offense that still performs statistically among the better of the country.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they were projected to be a top 10 offense by SP Plus. I think they finished just outside the top 20, 21st, I believe, is where they finished in the regular season. So, unfortunately, a little underwhelming relative to, I mean, again, the very high bar that you're setting at 10. So I can't be too critical. But I mean, if you're going to talk about a unit that overachieved versus a unit that underachieved relative to where they came, like what they did a year ago, I mean, it would be the Memphis offense. Again, super high bar, granted, and a super low bar for Memphis's defense. So, like, I mean, if you're 115th at something, you're overachieving if you come back next year and you're only 106th at something, So, like, I know it was not that. I mean, Memphis was in the 70s, I think.
Right, but the point is the point.
But yeah, like, it's not like Memphis's defense was reliable at any point this season. It really it felt the same to me, other than maybe the Tulane game where they finally kind of locked down and got some red zone stops and, forced a couple of fumbles. Both units, it felt very similar to last year, right? The offense did what it does, and Seth moved the ball when he had to. And if they were in a chase situation, they usually found a way to, get it done. And then the defense gave up 40 a game. That's just kind of how it felt to me this year.
I will say I felt covering it. Now, I'm not saying that the improvement was astronomical, but I felt covering it that this defense appeared to be more reliable in key situations
Right,
with the
right,
game
right,
on the
right,
line than
right,
last year. Like with the
right.
game on the line in key situations, you before the ball was snapped, you felt the Memphis defense could make a play here. I didn't feel that at all pretty at any point last year where you felt the Memphis defense was gonna make a play in a key moment. Now there were times where they did, but you weren't confident in it. And this year I felt a little more confident that the pressure was gonna create something or Chandler Martin was gonna make a play or Davion Ross or whoever. And so I will give them credit for that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, the Florida State obviously comes to mind. I think a couple of key stops, you know, against Tulane. So yeah, I mean, they had more, playmaking. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
They had more playmaking, and that made a difference. It's just like sort of between the 20s, But I guess that's just college football generally, unless you're, a Big Ten team like Indiana, just
Well,
absolutely undeniable, unstoppable, 66-0. Were you there for that?
I was there. Yeah, yeah.
You
I
got
was
to
in there,
show. You got to
freezing,
show.
freezing. It had been a while since I had been in those elements. I've been living out of Indiana since 2019 now. So it's been a
Yeah,
while since I've been uh
not quite
outside
built
for
for
that
it.
long in that type of weather. But it was a sight to see for sure. I mean, I'm glad I got to catch a game in this historic season that we'll probably never see again for IU.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows? I mean, Signetti's going to be there for the next 8 years, so you never know. You never quite know when it might come around again.
Well, I'm glad they're turning into a football school because I don't know what the heck the basketball team is doing
That's
over there,
right.
but that's for conversation for another day. We'll go ahead and get over to the ball game. I don't want to get the cussing on the podcast talking about IU basketball, but we'll go ahead. The Frisco Bowl, that's an interesting mark for Memphis, a 10-2 team. Um, I'm not sure if you read anybody listening read Tim Buckley's column on kind of how that played off and gave some context to that. But what did you think about Memphis landing in the Frisco Bowl as opposed to a bowl like Fenway Bowl in Boston?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Memphis wanted to go there, like you talked about, like Memphis was they kind of preferred the destination. It's a little homecoming for Seth, right? A chance to get back to, his neck of the woods and, go out on a high note. I mean, the opponent, as far as the opponent goes, I actually kind of think it's the perfect storm for Memphis because it's a power opponent, in the Big 12 that is going to be absolutely ravaged by the time this game happens because
They
they're
don't
going to
even
have,
have a full-time head coach right now.
yeah, they're not going to have a head coach. I mean, they might, but he ain't going to coach the game. Guys are going to transfer. They're going to be an absolute disaster. And you're going to get to kick their ass, for lack of a better term. I mean, that's just the truth. I mean, I assume Memphis will be a double-digit favorite in this game. And if they're not, it would really shock because they're like Memphis is super motivated, right? Seth's last game, Rock's last game, a lot of guys on the defense, so everybody's going to be up for this one and a chance to kick a Power Five team in the teeth, and they're not going to care. Like most of those guys are probably going to be third, fourth string anyway. So yeah, I actually think like even though it's not a marquee bowl by any stretch of the imagination, I think Ryan Silverfield is probably pretty happy with the draw.
Yeah, and I mean Seth and his family, like you said, they're not upset about it, right? I mean, it's back in his home state and everything. But speaking of the line, if I'm not mistaken, I think the line came out and
I didn't see it. I missed it.
I saw it. I saw it going out on Twitter, and I don't know. I wasn't able to fact check it, but anyway, I think Seth having his basically his last game, and he needs 2 touchdowns to tie another AAC record. I think to have that moment for Seth,
Yeah.
I think would be big. And to your point, I think what another thing that it does is the fact that it's December 17th. It gets the bowl game out of the way.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got a lot of positions that you need to retool and recruit for in the transfer portal heading into next year. I think this gives the coaching staff a chance to get their 11th win, and then hit the recruiting trail, probably trying to get another quarterback in the transfer portal in case, Antoine Hill or whatever is not ready as a true freshman. And so that
Yep.
gets your heels, you can hit the ground running while other programs are still preparing for a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it worked out really perfectly for Memphis in this one, and it's always a good day when, I mean, with that Iowa State win carried you through an entire offseason. I'm not saying West Virginia will have the same impact. I don't think it will, but it's definitely a nice punctuation to a good career for Seth and a lot of those other guys as well, Rock Taylor, so on and so forth.
And then speaking of recruiting, I mean, we knew Antoine Hill was committed for a long time, but to be able to hang on to that commitment, get him to sign, you flipped a couple SEC guys, on signing day and even the weekend before. Just what did you like about where Memphis stood recruiting? They were the highest ranked. The last time I checked, this stuff changes, but they were the highest recruiting group of five team in terms of the rankings. And so, what did you think about who they were able to bring and just the overall class?
Yeah, I've talked about this. It, covering it every year. I mean, Ryan Silverfield is really, really good at recruiting. He does a really good job. We'll debate his coaching. We'll talk about his decision making. But the one thing that he does year in and year out very consistently is he recruits at a high level. I remember when Memphis. This was before you got here, but Memphis was recruiting a Nigerian offensive tackle named Obinna Eze, and Ryan Silverfield learned Igbo, his native language, and talked to Obinna in Igbo. And Obinna came here obviously from Nigeria, and he didn't really understand like the stuff that you and I understand, right? Like you understand
Right.
that you understand that Memphis basketball is one of the elite programs of all time, right? Get that. Come in and you kind of know that. But like Obinna was a guy that he didn't know the difference between the institutional difference between Alabama, which was recruiting him, and Memphis. So what he sort of made his decision based on was pure effort level. You have Alabama that's maybe hitting him up once or twice a week. They've offered him, but they're not super serious about it because they have a million other big 6'6", 320-pound guys they're recruiting. And then you have Memphis that's learning Igbo, that's learning the language, that's every day calling him, texting, whatever. That's what Ryan Silverfield does. That's what sets him apart. Works very hard at it. He's a worker at it. And it's why he was able to get guys like, Simeon Blair, but Shannon Blair, right? Is why he's able to get, Antoine Hill, because he prioritizes these players, whereas the power leagues, they may sort of put him on the back burner.
Well, not even just the power leagues, right? Because to your point, right, I talked to a couple of the D-line commits. One of them was Lamar Fairfax, who was committed to Ohio. And then one of the things that he said is the why he flipped was because of the communication that Memphis had with him every week, right? He talked about Spence, the D-line coach, and just that dedication is what caused him to want to continue to press Memphis, and he flipped. And then you got a guy like JaQuinton Madison, who was committed to Arkansas.
Yep.
And Ryan tells them, like, look, and he was committed to Arkansas for a while, since the summer. And, Ryan tells him, like, just come up and visit. Just do a visit. He visits like the weekend before signing day. And on that visit on that Sunday, he flips. And so that tells you that there's something about how they're approaching recruiting that is allowing guys to feel like they want to come play there. And both of those guys, they talked about Coach Spence saying the way that he broke down film, right? He said he did basically show two different sides of film. He showed what they do on the field, and then he showed how what that can do can translate to what Memphis is trying to do defensively. And both of those guys appreciated that. And so just those tactics of effort and film study, I mean, they're causing guys to flip. And so you do got to give your tip your hat off to that staff for that. It's not just Ryan. Obviously, it starts with Ryan, but it's also trickled down to the people in his coaching staff.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So that's one area, Frank, where I don't ever worry about Memphis. I know they're going to be in the mix. I know they're going to have the chance with all those, blue chip guys that they recruit. Like they do a really good job of identifying the guys that can flip. And they usually have success doing that. So that is one thing that Memphis fans should definitely feel good about, is there's always going to be a lot of talent flowing in, to that program.
And now that Antoine is officially, a Tiger as far as his signature, and Ryan did say that he's going to come early. I know we talked about it last podcast about him not necessarily being a true freshman starter, but legitimately, what would you say the percentage wise of his chances of earning the spot as a true freshman the way Seth did? But it's hard to say because we don't know who they're going to get in the portal.
Yeah, I mean, right, but I still think like there's basically no chance to me that he starts as a true freshman. I mean, DJ Lagway didn't start as a true freshman, and that dude is awesome. I mean, that dude is, he's probably an NFL guy, and it still took 6-7 games before he was in the mix fully as the starter. So I'm not saying he can't be the starter by the end of the season. It just depends on how it goes. But to me, like you can't really have success in 2025 with a true freshman quarterback. Like it's too important a season for Ryan to be playing with fire like that. And I think like if I know him, like I think I know him, he'll go out and he'll get a veteran. Even if he's not nearly as talented as Antoine, you got to go get a guy that you can trust at the line of scrimmage who's sort of got a little bit more experience.
And I also think that it's in Antoine's best interest to not start him. I mean, we see this in the NFL all the time, right? You get these rookie quarterbacks, you throw them in the fire right away, and then their careers take a long time to get going because you didn't allow them to grow that first year or two or whatever. I think Antoine, you redshirt him, let him learn the system, and then when he comes in as a redshirt freshman, maybe he's ready to be trusted in the way that you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%, man. You definitely want to you definitely want to bring him up the right way, give him a chance to develop. Like Seth, I feel like was an anomaly. Seth was a coach's son. Seth played a certain style. Like he was like Seth was the same guy as a senior that he was as a freshman, right? It didn't really change. Like he was as good as a freshman, honestly, as he was gonna be, for his entire career. And that I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know, but I just don't think guys are do that.
It says that his floor, like he came in with an extremely high floor, and most freshmen don't come in with a floor as high as Seth did.
Yeah, I mean, he's the only. I mean, Paxton was the starter as a freshman, but it took a couple of weeks, and it was not without great resistance and also great struggle. There were games, I think that was a 3-win season, Now it ended up being greater later for that time, but is anybody around here going to have the stomach to have a 3-9, 4-8 season in the name of a quarterback taking his lumps as a freshman and coming? First of all, you don't even know if Dude's going to be back for a sophomore year.
After that,
so it's a delicate balance, man. It's a delicate balance in just terms of, you cannot give a guy a chance to take his lumps anymore at the expense of wins and losses. Those days are over, man. Like it used to be, that's what you would do. If you knew you had to do for 3 years, 4 years, you'd be like, all right, we'll start you as a freshman because we know when you're a junior and a senior, you'll be amazing for us. Well, you ain't keeping that guy as a junior and a senior in 2025. So you really got to be careful with just how much you invest and what the cost of that investment ultimately is. If you put him in and he's awesome, that's one thing. But it's when he struggles and he's throwing picks and he's making bad decisions and wrong reads, how long do you stick with that guy? I think that becomes the hard part.
I will say the best thing that did happen for them in terms of recruiting Antoine is the fact that they were able to start Seth as a true freshman and give him the reins for 4 years. Because when I talked to him in the summertime after he committed, what he saw them do with Seth is what enticed him to come. And it's not to say that he's going to be upset if he's not a starter or anything as a freshman, but to see that he feels like he'll have a legitimate opportunity to compete, I think was a benefit in bringing him in, because we're saying he won't start because we think he won't be ready. Well, if he, surprises everybody and for whatever reason he is ready, Memphis program has shown that if you're ready as a true freshman, they'll throw you out there at quarterback if you are actually ready.
I don't remember who who Seth's. I don't remember who that competition was. Was it like Peter Parrish? Like
You talking about when Seth was coming in?
Yeah.
So it was Grant. It was Grant Goodnow.
Oh, that's
And-
right. That's right. That's right.
And
That's
Grant
right.
Goodnow had got hurt.
He got hurt.
But from what I was hearing, like what I was hearing after the fact, is that some people felt that Seth was on his way to winning that job before Grant got hurt. Now I can't, I'm not in those practice meetings and all that, so I don't know. But I was told that some people felt that that's the way it was going to end up trending, even if Grant didn't get hurt, is what I was told by somebody a while back.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
Greg Goodell got hurt, and that kind of solidified that Seth was going to be the.
Well, and here's the thing: Grant Goodell never did anything anywhere, right? Like he never got a job anywhere else. So it's possible that he just wasn't a good quarterback. So but again, Silverfield brought him in, and I suspect that he will do the same this year. A guy,
yeah, because the expectation going into that offseason is that Grant Goodell was going to be the starter. They did not plan on
out of high school. So yes, there's no question about it. Silverfield will bring another quarterback in, and a good one, I would expect.
Well, I think that wraps up this edition of the podcast. I appreciate all y'all listening. Don't forget to read more of our coverage from Memphis football, Memphis basketball. You can check out some of our Grizzlies coverage over at dailymemphian.com. And stay warm for the holidays.